Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest, Karl Kolb PhD, Chief Science Officer of the High Sierra Group, which provides the nation's largest purveyor of food safety products and services. Today's topic, particularly amenable to food producers, GFSI FDA Inspector Auditor requirements. After that brief introduction, Dr. Kolb, would you like to add anything to our update, to our frequent cast?
I think it's very good, Andy. I appreciate the time. And let me jump right into it because the FDA is, through the Food Safety Modernization Act, will be looking for increased qualifications of the auditors that will be employed from these private third parties and of those that they expect of the private third parties, especially those who are purveying the Global Food Safety Initiative certifications. And let me just say in the beginning, there's a couple definitions we need to clear up here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, Dr. Kolb, let's begin with a very general discussion, and then you can go into your definitions. First, what is a food safety inspection?
Well, a food safety inspection is an audit or an inspection of your facility to a certain established standard for a particular purpose. You could have a food safety inspection for general purposes. You could have a food safety inspection just strictly for microbiological results or concerns or testing or programs. It could be strictly for food security, or it could be for the HACCP program, for instance.
Very good. What is GFSI FS inspection? What is that?
Well, GFSI, as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware, is the Global Food Safety Initiative taken on by Walmart, Safeway, Kroger, and many of those other folks back in the year 1999-2000 who said we need something better than a checklist audit, something that is robust, that follows a true quality system. And they began looking at various audits to see who filled that bill. And, of course, BRC did right off the top, and SQF, Global Gap, and now there's several others they've added to the list. And these are called audits and not inspections. Inspections are something that goes in, looks for indications that there are programs, looks to see that things are generally working as they are prescribed, whereas an audit is much like the IRS when they show up at your door. They go through and make sure that things balance and counterbalance and that there's robustness in the system and that you are adhering to your policy.
Well, Dr. Kolb, what does one of these audits cover? What do they inspect?
Well, they inspect virtually everything. A good, robust system inspects everything from A to Z, from what comes in to what goes out and everything in between. The management practices, the practices of every one of the prerequisite programs in a food safety plan, and there's some 30 or 40 of those or many more. It looks at the outcomes to make sure you're producing according to the standard that has been prescribed for you.
Very good. As we look at those requirements, and many of them are quite lengthy, are there any penalties for noncompliance to those standards? Because it's a voluntary situation at this point, isn't it?
Well, the worst penalty is that you kill someone, and you have that hanging over your head for the rest of your life. But there's penalties such as losing your customer base, running into an FDA code that you violated, and perhaps a civil penalty. You have penalties for noncompliance in certain areas that require you to redevelop a program and put more time and resources into coming up to the standards. So the penalties run many directions, from ethical to civil to moral. The penalties range in China from death if you do the wrong thing in food safety to being ostracized from the entire food industry. So there's a whole range of penalties based on who you're working for, where you're at. There's a bill before Congress right now that a food safety violation is an act which is punishable by death. So there's some strict penalties being considered. There's some strict penalties that being employed by overseas countries. You've got the financial loss. You got the implications upon your career and the careers of many people.
Well, Dr. Kolb, with all those penalties, let's talk about some of the benefits. What are the benefits of allowing these auditors to come into a facility and issue a report?
Well, if they do a good job, and I like to define what a good job is. In other words, there's no conflict of interest. There's no implications in terms of wanting to simply do a good job, so they're invited back to make another sale for another account the next year. In other words, another recertification. On balance, they come in. They should take a standard, accept the standard that you accepted, that your clients have accepted, and it will give you a very fair baseline of exactly where you stand against that standard. That's important because although everyone wants 100% because it looks good to your customers and your boss likes it, what you really want is, what is my real baseline standard? Where do I really stand today? Because after a period of time, in many inspections, you're going to reach that 99 or 100%. But we're not shooting for a score. We're not shooting for a superior. We're shooting to say, where are we now? Where's our holes? Where are we strong? What can we do better? So that we do provide safe and quality food to the general public. That's the objective.
Very good. As we look at these requirements, can you tell us a little bit about the auditors, what their training is, what their certification, maybe any continuing education programs that they undergo, so that we have adequate judgment that's being exerted by these auditors?
Well, there's a difference between an inspector and an auditor. I'll take an auditor first. An auditor is someone who's got years of training, years of experience, has been tested, thoroughly vetted to make sure that they know their trade, their skill, they have the experience, the science. They've been around the block a few times. These people come into your plant, and they'll spend 2 or 3 days there, and they'll do the job right. They know how to read a standard. They know how to apply a standard. They know what they see. They know how to check for robustness. They know how to check for verification and validation. You take an inspector may have all these qualifications, but for the most part, an inspector is someone who is a couple notches down. They may be new at the art of inspection. They may have an adequate education. They may have some training. They may or may not be inspecting in an area that they're familiar with. These are good people. There's good inspectors out there, but they're not necessarily the true, tried, tested auditor that we're seeing now manifest itself through the GFSI program.
Well, Dr. Kolb, you have had many years' experience in this field, and you have many clients. The question I have for you, what is the correct posture for a food production manager, a food quality manager, food safety manager, or a food security manager when approached in one of these audit situations?
Well, there's many ways to answer that question, and I'll just answer it the way I think it's best answered. If you're approached with a question, you need to answer it as forthright and straight up as you can, because once again, you want the right answer. You want to make sure that the inspector hears what you're saying and understands the standard and says, okay, this is on balance. You've answered it correctly. You're following the right approach to accomplishing the standard, this objective. Another way to say it is some people will answer a question based on what they think the auditor wants to hear. That's not the right way to do things. Some people will answer a question based on what they believe is the correct thing to say. But it comes down to those who are in full compliance with the standard, who worked hard to make sure that they have the policy, the program, the spec, and the report, and they're doing the training. They've got the validation. They've got the verification. These people can answer the question, which will answer the standard, which will get the correct response from the inspector. You are on balance. You have some work to do. I don't think you've answered the standard the way it's expected to be implemented. So there's a lot of ways to look at this. Quite normally, it's the staff who is ready, prepared, has trained, that correctly answers the question according to what policy they're employing, according to what particular standard they're expecting to implement.
Very good. Dr. Kolb, let me ask, what are your suggestions on the difference between a food safety consultation and the actual audit?
Well, it's night and day. A consultation is someone who comes in, an expert, and what is an expert is up to what you believe an expert is, who comes in and assists with implementing, troubleshooting, developing a program, doing something to assist with you accomplishing your food safety objectives, versus an auditor that comes in and will tell you, without telling you how to accomplish the goal, will read the standard, will perform a risk analysis in his mind or on paper, or ask you how you have accomplished this standard and see if it fits the bill, see if it fits what the standard or the policy is expecting of you. And remember, each one of these standards now is not something just anyone dreamed up. They come from three sources. They come from principally three sources. First is it comes from science. In other words, science says that you'll only have 10 colony-forming units of something in water. Regulatory, the second one, said that the government wants it done this way, which means it probably comes from science to begin with. Or industry, because the industry says it's got to be done this way. A good example of that is hairnets. You don't find a lot of scientific basis for hairnets. Oh, yeah, your hair falls out. We know how many hairs you lose in a day. But is there really good empirical science regarding the wearing of hairnets? No, there isn't. You can Google it and you won't see a whole lot of information. But it's something the industry expects to happen because it's a perception issue. So that's a standard. And how that standard is followed is by folks who understand the why of the standard, and that why is the science, the regulatory, or the industry piece.
Dr. Kolb, I'd like to address this question in two parts. A, we know that the Food Safety Modernization Act has not been fully implemented, and we're still waiting with bated breath as an industry for those exact regulations. With that, couched in that framework, what would a college student do that was thinking about entering the food safety inspection auditor arena? What kind of training should they have? And if they're already in a food area but they'd like to train to become one, what are some of their options?
Well, let me just throw some figures out on the table for you. It takes 16 years to mature an inspector to the point of becoming a very fine auditor. It takes roughly something in the neighborhood of easily over $250,000 in college education, in training, in understanding your particular skill and trade by going to an inspector auditor school, for instance, the one offered by Ceres University. It takes you shadowing 8 to 10 audits. It takes an involvement in your industry, applying your trade, to learn the inside or the skills or the things that are the nuts and bolts that put together a food safety program. And then it takes a number of years under the skilled hand of someone to say, to give you a good evaluation of where you stand as an auditor. The auditors we have in our Global Food Safety Initiative program and series certifications all have a good 14 to 16 years behind them. They've got a college education in quality management, in agriculture, and food production, and engineering, in nutrition or food safety or food science. They've got 7 to 10 years on a farm or in a production plant. They've got a number of years of very intense training done by SQF or Primus GFS or one of these approved GFSI schemes. Plus, they've got 2 or 3 years of standing watching someone do an audit, being part of an audit, and then being critiqued as an auditor. It's not easy to become an auditor. It's well-paying. A good auditor makes from $1,000 to $3,000 a day, perhaps. It's rewarding to see how the industry works, moving from coast to coast, north and south, east and west, looking at a number of different facilities. And it's exceptionally rewarding, too, because you are a very respected person in your industry. I see three types of auditors out there. Those that people say, that person's easy, you'll get a good score. I see the kind of auditor where people don't say very much because the guy gives a very fair audit, and he's in and he's out, and you get a fair score. Then I see those that people say, this is a great auditor. And the difference between someone who is mediocre or comes and goes, just a good auditor, not necessarily mediocre, and a very great auditor are those who really understand the standard, who have taken auditing as a career, and who can go in and apply the standard. They can't train to it, they can't educate to it, but there's an understanding so they can talk about it, and people feel like there's a good understanding of their program and where they met the mark and where they haven't.
Dr. Kolb, that's an excellent review of the requirements and the variability in the skill sets of some of these auditors. I'd like to now allow you time to summarize our discussion for the purposes of our audience, which again are food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. If you'd like to review what is a food safety inspection, what is the GFSI FDA inspection, what does it cover, what are the penalties for noncompliance, and what are the benefits?
Well, that's a lot of waterfront to cover, Andy. Let me just start by saying that you need to choose a standard for your plant that reflects a good quality system. A checklist audit or a one-day review doesn't really tell you much about what's going on except that you have the lights on. You want to look for an audit that is a true quality audit, much like a GFSI audit, that looks at the verification and the validation of your programs. That's all encompassing from A to Z of your plant. It's well balanced, and it's performed by an auditor who is experienced in the standard, and number two, who's very experienced in how you do your business. It's very frustrating to sit through a 3-day audit and have to train the auditor on what he's supposed to be evaluating of you. I've had auditors who come in, and they've been meat auditors all their life. They're trying to audit a fish plant or a juice plant or a produce plant. And believe me, there's a difference between night and day in all those plants, even though the principles may be the same. So you want to select an auditor, and you want to turn an auditor down if you don't think they comply, and find an auditor who's fair, who understands, and is willing to give you a sound evaluation of where you stand. The GFSI program and GFSI auditors, generally speaking, do this. The FDA and the Food Modernization Act want to comply or want to mirror the same standard because they don't have the time and they don't have the resources to go out and audit like the Food Modernization Act wants them to or needs them to or has required them to. So they're going to be looking at third parties to fill the gap. And when they look at a third party, they're going to say, what are the standards of your auditors? And this is where the certification companies say they have this degree, they have this training, they have this experience, they've been tested, and they know that they comply and they know their trade.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Kolb, you have done an excellent job again of reviewing the topics which are of interest to our listenership. I'd like to now allow you time to review for our listening audience your particular skill set of High Sierra Group and the food safety services and products which you offer.
Well, thanks, Andy. I appreciate the time. Although this is a little bit of a commercial, let me just say that we work very hard on a couple of fronts at the High Sierra Group. One is to be an all-encompassing, all-providing food safety, food servicing, food provider to the food industry, in that we will sense what you need or what's going on in the industry and attempt to provide the best service, the best equipment, the best consulting, the best certifications we can. That's where we're the largest. That's why we're the best. That's why we grow every year at an astounding rate. We have a tremendous client base, a very loyal client base. We've had clients who have been with us more than 25 years, and that's very exciting. The second thing I think is most important is, and we've got three things that are, I tell all the new employees who come on board, and everyone is handpicked by myself, is that number one, we answer the client or the person who calls us that same day on the phone. We have no voice recorders. We have no answering system. That person gets a real person on the phone. And we don't mind taking the time to talk to them, to work through their problems, to provide them with materials and policies or programs that they may need. And we don't charge for that. And the fact that they get a live person on the phone and knows what they're talking about is exceptionally important. Number two, and this is the toughest one for us because we've upset some people at times, is we will tell you the honest truth. We won't patronize you. We won't tell you something to kick the ball down the road, and we won't tell you something to keep your business. We're very honest about what we do. Good candor, straightforwardness, and some people have a hard time with that, but so far no one's bailed on us because of that. But I think that's what people are paying for if they're calling us. And number three, we get people answers the same day. If we don't, we call them back that same day and say, we'll have an answer for you tomorrow. So I think those are the three things that are most important, but it's all with a coat of integrity, trust and integrity that we work hard for. If we go in to work at a person's plant, we're usually there more than 7, 8 hours a day. 10, 14 hours, I sometimes find my people working a day because they just want to do the right job. They want to make sure that the people are satisfied. We don't build false expectations. What we build is someone who says, wow, you guys really gave me some phenomenal service. And that's what we like to hear. We've got a great customer base. We do a very good job. My father always said, if you want to work for somebody, then work for them. And we work for you like we're your employee. We just don't come in and leave and then send you a big bill at the end of the week. So that's us.
Dr. Kolb, we thank you for your time. Excellent summary of your work and your organizational objectives. I'd like to now thank you and allow you a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Annie. Appreciate talking with you, and I wish everyone a Happy New Year, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kolb. Have a great evening.
Thank you, sir.